friends, welcome back to the channel. Today I am doing my September Game of the Month video. It's coming in a little bit late and I don't have too many games to talk to you about in this video. Usually in these videos I do up to 9 games that I talk about. I have 3 different categories. One of them is a new game of the month. Another one is a remake of the month. And the last game category is older games, which are not super old games, they're just games that are older than 6 months. And the reason for that is to take some of the focus off of the new and shiny games and put some of that focus back on good games, games that are already demonstrating some staying power and lasting power. Now here's the thing, I didn't play that many games in September. So normally I would have up to a winner in each of those 3 categories and then up to 2 runners-up. However, this month, I'm only going to be looking at 2 categories, which is the new game of the month, which is Coffee Traders. I always keep the new game of the month, the winner here, to kind of preside over the entire video. And then I have a game of the month in the remake category. So I don't have a game that I played in September that was an older game that I feel was good enough to really highlight. And I don't have any runners-up in any of these categories this month. So that means I'm only going to be talking to you about 2 games today. One of them's Coffee Traders, the other one's going to be my remake of the month, and that game is Grand Austria Hotel. Now, they did a Kickstarter a little while back, fairly recently, it just delivered, for a new expansion called Let's Waltz. And when they did that, they also published a new version of the base game. And if you did what I did, you could get the whole thing together in this nice box sleeve, this new edition, and it's awesome. Grand Austria Hotel is a medium weight Euro where players are running hotels. And they'll have guests come in and sit down at their tables. They'll be able to draft the cards, so they will choose who's coming into their hotel and sitting at these outdoor tables. Every character will have something different they want in terms of food or drink type. So there is a resource gathering element in the game, and you will need to serve your customers and fulfill their needs. Once you do that, you can then place those customers in rooms. Now there are different colored rooms, and on the player boards, they're kind of organized into different sections, and so there are different kind of area majority scorings depending on if you fill up certain areas or if you complete a full color, just kind of how you put people into these rooms. Now I so far have only played the base game of Grand Austria Hotel, and I think I'd like to play it a few more times before I move on to the expansions. It's that good. And I would put Grand Austria Hotel in a category with games like Concordia that I feel sit in this sweet spot where lighter gamers can play it. It's not too difficult for them, yet the choices are compelling and good enough that heavier gamers will still really be involved with this game and not feel like, you know, they're not getting enough out of it. So Grand Austria Hotel for me is one of those games that most gamers, I think, can kind of come together and everyone can enjoy this game. Now, in the game that I played with 2 of my friends, I was trying to pursue a goal for something at the very start of the game that was a tough goal. And I sort of walked down that path a very long way when it was not going my way, and I kept pursuing it because it got to the point where I wasn't going to be able to salvage my game any other way, and so I was kind of tunnel visioned in what I was doing. It was a bad strategy, and I accept that, I'm fine with that. But my point is, even when I kind of painted myself into a corner, and there was really no way that I could compete in the game, I still had a ton of fun, I still enjoyed the game, and I still enjoyed the choices that I was making. And I think that's the hallmark of a great design, is can you enjoy it even when things aren't going your way? As well as, does it seem like there's a chance that you could come back? Now, I didn't come back and get a victory, but very late in the game, I did come back and make a few enormous moves that kind of chained off each other and did all these things. And while I wasn't able to be competitive in the scoring at the end game, I was I closed that gap enough that it made the end of the game very exciting for me and I think the other two people that I was playing with. So that's a very good sign as well. Now this expansion here, the Let's Waltz expansion, has 5 different modules in it. So once you play the base game enough that you get bored with it, and honestly, I think for this game, it could take a very long time for that to happen. I mean, the base game is that good. And I think there's enough variability baked into the mechanics and the various cards and things in the base game that you can play it for a very long time, I think, and be very happy with it and not need expansions. I think the base game on its own has very long legs. Nevertheless, if you really like it and you play it that much because it is that good, you may eventually want something to expand the game a bit more. So the Let's Waltz expansion has 5 different modules. You can add any or all of them in at the same time. 2 of them are kind of bigger modules. The first module in this Let's Waltz expansion is about ballrooms. And so that adds in a whole different mechanic, like a whole different kind of thing in the game that you can spend time with and spend points on. And it just expands the game mechanically into this new area. The second module is called Celebrities, and that's going to add some new cards into the game. So they do say in the instructions for the expansion that if you put both of those modules in together, it's going to really ramp up the complexity of the game and probably the length as well. So that's good to know. And as someone who likes heavier games, that's something I definitely will look at. The other 3 modules you can play, with, without, whatever. They do kind of smaller things, but they aren't things that are going to really change the game as much or increase the complexity to levels beyond the base game. But I think with 5 different modules, that's a lot of variability on top of a game that doesn't even really need it. And when you've got 2 of them that are kind of meatier and can play off each other really well, there's just a lot of variability in this complete package. So this is my remake of the month because it is a game that was published previously. Grand Austria Hotel has been around for a while. It's already proven itself. But Lookout Games, who published this version, they've been putting out some really interesting, good stuff lately. And so they're a publisher that I'm watching. Now, I've talked in several recent videos about Capstone Games, who I think has been my favorite retail publisher within the last year or 2. And they've just nailed it out of the park. They've been publishing a spectacular slate of games. I don't know that Lookout is quite up to that level, but Lookout is doing some really good things. So I'm very, very happy to have this new version of the game and to have it, kind of all-inclusive with this expansion and 5 modules. I can't remember exactly how I rated this, but I think it's somewhere in the 8.5 range. If it's a remake game, I tend to rate those in a different part of my spreadsheet from newer games just to keep them separate, and I don't remember those off the top of my head as well. But I think I rated it around an 8.5. I think 8.5 makes a lot of sense to me. And once I get into the expansion content, that score could even go up. I don't really see it going down because the game is so good. But once I dive into this expansion content, it's very likely that score could go up from an 8.5 even to a 9. So this is just a great, really well-designed medium weight Euro. You're going to be doing things like resource management, card drafting, area control, set collection, and then as you add in more modules, there'll be more mechanics that may open up as well. But this is just a great game all around and something that I would recommend to almost anyone. Finally, let's talk about this guy. And I actually just made a first impressions video for Coffee Traders. So if you'd like to get a look at the game on the table and see me talk about some of those systems in more detail and how they work, it's not a full teach and review, it's just a first impressions video to give you an idea if it's a game that you will like and if it's a game for you. I will put the link to that video down below in the description so you can pop over to that video and see more on Coffee Traders if it's something that appeals to you. But for now, I'm just going to talk a little bit more off the cuff about Coffee Traders. So I think the first thing that must be mentioned is that this is a very heavy game. I would put this in the category with Vital Lacerda's games, the games that Mindclash makes, like Anacreony and Tricarion and Cerebria, and some other games that I'd maybe throw in at that level would be City of the Big Shoulders, Feudum, maybe Clinic. But as far as heavy games go, this is on the extreme end of the bell curve. So much so that I think heavy gamers, gamers who play a lot of heavy games and are at the point now where they can pick up on those kinds of games very quickly, they may be taken back a little bit to an earlier time in their lives when learning games took a little bit more effort, because there's a lot going on with coffee traders. And again, it is on that far end of the bell curve. Not only that, the rule book is not the best rule book. It's not laid out that well. It's designed in a very kind of thematic way, and the information is, I think, presented in a way to make it more interesting to look at as if you're reading kind of a pamphlet instead of being clear and complete. So when you're reading the rule book for coffee traders, you may kind of have to jump around a little bit, page around. There may be a lot of things that you're going to be going to Board Game Geek and looking up in the forums just to get clarity. Also, the iconography on the game is convoluted, I think is maybe the best word. There's just a lot of clutter in the iconography, and it's not designed in such a way that it's always intuitive or flows together. Once you know the game, everything makes sense, and once you have a handle on some of the iconography, it'll start to make more sense, and you can kind of figure out the parts that you're not understanding. But it's not immediately clear, even if you're very used to playing very complex games. I think you really need to spend some time with the rule book and do a first play, kind of a learning play, to really kind of wrap your mind and your brain around everything that's in Coffee Traders and all of the, kind of glut of iconography, as well as all of the mechanics and player pieces. Now, it's not a bad thing, but you should know that there is this barrier to entry, and that heavier gamers will have to maybe jump through a couple extra hoops than they're used to jumping through. Also, there are probably more player pieces in this game than almost any other game that I've played before, and that includes 4X games with lots of pieces like Eclipse or Twilight Imperium. There are a lot of player pieces in this game, which is interesting for a retail game. Also, if you look at my first impressions video, the board for Coffee Traders is enormous. I think it's the largest board I've ever experienced. I could barely get it in the frame. I kind of had to cheat it a little bit to get it in the frame. So it is a huge board, and it is a big package for a retail game in a lot of ways. Now, when you compare it to similar games like the Vital Lacerda Deluxe games or the games that Mindclash puts out, it's not quite up to that production level. Of course, those games were also produced through Kickstarter, so they kind of had some more money behind them. They knew what they could do as they were funding, and they were adding in things like screen printing on the wooden components, increasing various kinds of production quality. So Coffee Traders may not quite be on that level, but it's much closer than you normally will get in a retail game, and it's closer than I think I've seen any other game. But just know that there is a little bit of a gap there still. And it's an expensive game for a retail game. The MSRP on this is, I think, $120. And it's a big game, it's a big box, it's got lots of components, it's got a huge board, and if you like heavy games, it is a very good game with a lot of variability. I don't think this is a game that you're going to play a handful of times and then feel like, oh, I've mastered it and I'm done with it. In fact, part of the appeal of Coffee Traders is that there are so many mechanical systems in the game and so many different choices for you to make. And in any one game, you really kind of have to pick and choose. If you try to do a little bit of everything in Coffee Traders, you're going to end up doing a lot of nothing, which means that you have to make choices and pursue, 2, 3, maybe 4 scoring possibilities. Now, what that means is that as you play it, you can vary up the things that you're pursuing. And that, again, will give you more variability in the game as you play it a lot over a period of time, because you'll be doing different things during different plays. During one play, you might say, let me try to fulfill all of the contracts. And that's so hard to do that I know I won't be able to do much else. So I'm just going to put everything into the contracts. Now that would leave you no ability to pursue the coffee bar at all. So on another game, you may try to get as much presence as possible in the coffee bar and really go hard into that. Another game, you might say, I'm going to try to build every plantation and the 2 bonus buildings that building those plantations unlocks. But again, when you're doing these kinds of things in this game, it takes so much effort and so many resources to fulfill a little section of that game. It really limits very much what you can do elsewhere. And I think that gives you a lot that you can explore in terms of replayability, because you can kind of choose to walk down one of many different paths every game. There are other games out there where you need to really do some of everything. And in those games, finding out exactly what that balance is key. It may vary a little bit from game to game, depending on what you're doing and what other players are doing. So you may have to adjust your strategy a bit in those games, but they still all start from a place of really needing to do everything kind of equally and maximizing that as best you can. And the thing with those games, because you're kind of pursuing the same strategy every game, they get older faster. But a game like Coffee Traders is going to give you more options, more divergent paths. So ultimately that leads to a lot more gameplays before you feel like you've really exhausted all of your possibilities and done everything that you can in the game, several different times with different players. Now, I still haven't played everything that I want to play from 2021. In fact, there are still a lot of games that haven't even published yet. And I think with what's happening with the global shipping crisis right now, there are a lot more games delayed. So we may have a big chunk of games that were intended to publish in 2021 that won't come out until 2022. I think even with retail games, if those games are getting produced overseas and they have to ship them back over, we're still seeing a delay in publication, even in retail games. So it's not just Kickstarter, it's kind of the entire industry, all games, retail as well. Unless, of course, they're produced, domestically and they're just getting shipped back and forth within the United States. But as far as I'm concerned, and from what I've seen, there's a good, third of the games that were probably intended to publish in 2021 that I believe will end up getting, pushed back to 2022. So my point here, though, is that there are more games for me to play before I make any final lists for 2021. So I'm saying this at a period in time in November, at the beginning of November, where I've played a lot of the games, but still not all. Not by a long shot. But all of that said, right now, Coffee Traders is sitting at my number 5 spot for 2021. And the only Euro that is ahead of it is Kanban EV, which was designed by Vital Lacerda, who is my favorite designer. And I personally consider Kanban EV to be among his 3 best games, along with Lisboa and On Mars. So the fact that Kanban EV is the only Euro ahead of this right now is saying a lot. It means that I really, really do like it. I also, for now, have given it a 9 out of 10. And I think in a good year, I'd be hard-pressed to give half a dozen games a 9 or higher. So it's a really good score. It's a great game. It's a game that I highly recommend, with the caveat that it is definitely for heavier gamers, and even heavier gamers need to understand that there's going to be more of a barrier to entry, kind of more learning and more of a convoluted teach than even they are used to. Now, I do plan on getting my October Game of the Month out next week, so I'll be talking about more games in a Game of the Month scenario very, very soon. And that video, like this one, won't have a ton of games, but I believe I do have 1 game in each of the 3 categories, and that I'll be talking about 3 games in that video. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Finally, I'd just like to say, if either of these games are games that are kind of in your wheelhouse and appeal to you, then I think they're very solid blind buys. They're that good, and they both really have a very, very high recommendation from me. I think either one of these games are going to be really exciting additions to your collection that you'll be very, very happy to have. So please remember to like and subscribe, especially if this video was helpful to you and if you'd like to see content like this in the future. Have a great week, play some great games, and keep your eyes peeled for more new videos from me. One of them should be a Kickstarter weekly for this week, which I'll be filming on Thursday and editing on Friday, and it should be published on Friday, as well as a Dinosaur World First Impressions video. So take care, and I will see you soon.